Well, it must be good because Carl gave it to me, right?
Yes.
He told me, yeah. So it must be real. So this is, I would pass it around, but then obviously I would never get it back. So this is a 20-pound note, believe it or not. And by the way, if you've seen this exercise before, I appreciate it. Maybe not ruin it for anybody else. What I'm going to do is, or what we are going to do, is we are going to auction off this 20-pound note, right? But there are very, very special rules for this auction, okay? Typically, what you might expect is the highest bidder, whoever bids the highest for this 20-pound note, is going to win the money, right? You'll win. You have to pay me, but you'll win the money. But especially, and this is very, very key. I want to make sure everybody understands this. The second highest bidder does not win the money, but will also have to pay me. Okay? Now, the way we're going to do this, we're going to start the bidding at 5 pounds. The rule is going to be that the bids can only go up in 1 pound increments. So if we start with 5, the next bid has to be 6, and then after that, 7, okay? But remember, highest bidder wins the money. Highest bidder has to pay me, wins the money. Second highest bidder doesn't win the money, but also has to pay me. Make sense? You guys understand the rules of the game? Do I have 5 pounds for this 20 pounds? 5 pounds, thank you very much. Do I have 6? 6 in the back there?
6.
Yes, 6 bids, thank you very much. Are you going to call out?
Yep.
Or, okay.
Now going for 7. Let's get 7. I've got 7 in the back.
Nobody over here? Thank you.
8.
Right?
I got 7 and 8. Let's go next.
It's 20 pounds, guys. 20 pounds. Who can win this?
I got Jose with 9, 9
10,
and
10
8.
over here.
Is
Thank
that
you very
10,
much.
9 and 10? 11, 10 and 11.
12, thank you very
12.
much.
11 and
12.
12.
Yes. Nobody else wants to get. You can have 20 pounds for 12 pounds. Anybody else? What's that? So Jose obviously was listening to the instructions, right?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Who's got 12?
12 and 13 back there.
Who's got? Can I have 14? Someone's got to give
I
me
got 14.
14. Thank you very much.
13 and 14.
15. Somebody give me 15. 15. Thank
15.
you. 16.
16.
16. Thank you very much.
We're
Have
walking
16,
with them.
17. You can still have 20 pounds for less than 20 pounds.
17.
17, thank you very much. Thanks for that. Do I have 18? 18 pounds. 18 over here, thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. You're just waiting for it to get, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, all right, so we have 18 over here.
17.
19.
You got 19? 19 and 18?
Somebody else.
We're back up to 20.
We're up to 20 now.
19 and 20.
21 over to you. Can I have 21?
21.
It is. Thank you very much, yes.
21 and 20. 22.
22, yes.
I got 21 and 22.
23? She go 23. All right, yes, thank you very much. And you're going to go 24. All right.
24.
Actually, so all right. Well, we're going to talk about this in a later. But just because you guys participated, what we'll do is we'll donate 20 pounds each to a charity of your choice. I know there's going to be a charity that Lean Agile Brighton is supporting. So thanks to both of you for demonstrating for us. We'll do that in a second. Where's my?
You had it. There, dude. This will happen all day.
Yeah. So when we talk about, obviously the title of our talk is Inept and Inapt. I'm just going to take just a few seconds to bash some frameworks here, if that's quite all right. What's the foundation? Can anybody tell me, those of you familiar with Scrum, what's the foundation of the Scrum framework? If you were to ask Scrum practitioners, they would say the Scrum framework is built on a foundation of empirical process control, right? Mm-hmm. Empiricism specifically, but empirical process control. I kind of just gave you the answer, but what are the ways or what are the 3 words that Scrum talks about in terms of driving improvements using empirical process control? Inspect and adapt, right? That's what you're saying. Every Scrum event is an opportunity for empirical process control to inspect and adapt. Scrum's not alone in this. What about Kanban? What's Kanban? What's Kanban kind of built on? What's kind of the foundation of Kanban? Post-its, of course,
yes.
Right? That's what we do with Kanban. What else? What's like, when you think of Kanban, like what's the one thing you think of? A board, right? Visualization, right? So all of these frameworks have these tools in terms of helping us to, either empirically or transparently or whatever, understand the world. And as you can imagine, we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about the problems with those approaches.
Yeah, so as Dan said, we've got multiple of these tools prescribed to us to inspect and adapt. One of the first ones that everyone uses in a retrospective is, how does the team feel? How are we feeling? Is this going well? How do we inspect and adapt from that? Math, for those of you who are familiar with story points and cost of delay and all that fun stuff, all those things, velocity, are a way for the team to inspect and adapt. Visualization, as Dan talked about it, especially in terms of Kanban, all those, the boards, the blocker columns, expedite lanes, all that fun stuff, it's for us to inspect and adapt. And of course, WIP limits. Can't talk about Kanban without talking about WIP limits. Though that every time you violate WIP, every time you're up at WIP, it's a way for us to inspect and adapt. The way teams usually do this stuff, has anyone run a retrospective using these, what went well? Yeah, almost everybody in this audience has done something like this. We go into retrospective, talk to everybody, figure out, hey, what can we do better? How do we inspect what we've just done, and how do we adapt? And we do a lot of things because math. If we don't understand how things are going, let's just throw some math at it. We look at story points, velocity, cost of delay, and both Dan and my favorite, probability distribution curves, curve fitting stuff. We throw as advanced math as possible at stuff to figure out, hey, how are we doing and can we do better? Because if some math is good, more math obviously is better. And of course, visualization. There is so much wrong with this board that we're not going to spend any time on it right now, but obviously we look at, in our stand-ups, we look at boards and go, how are things going? Every stand-up is an opportunity for us to inspect and adapt. There's a base problem with empiricism, though. All the tools that we just went over real quick there, they are our way of trying to accommodate for incomplete information. At any point of time, the team does not have complete information on what's going on. So we use all those things to account for the incomplete information. We use these proxies, story points, boards, whatever those are, as a way to complete the information. We're going to talk a little bit about biases later. We bring our own biases as team members, as team leads, whoever we are, to filling in those gaps that we have in information. And finally, we are pretty inept at inspect. But teams are very, very bad at diagnosing what's going wrong. Hopefully, we'll be able to give you some tools to help with that. This is you.
So let's talk about some of those failures of empiricism, because you might be out there thinking, well, God, of course, my teams don't suffer from this, right? I work with a great team. We are great at empiricism. We're great at transparency. We're great at incorporating all of this information. When we let off with a game earlier on, empirically, what could we say about that auction? What are some of the empirical statements that we could have made about that particular auction? I'm sorry, what's that? I became a winner. Empirically, can we say that? That's actually, I'm glad you said that. Empirically, is that an empirical observation? Is that true? So it was, I became a winner the second the bids went above 10 pounds. Is that true? Empirically, I'm just saying empirically. Is that? I don't know if empirically, but maybe we should take a step back. What's the definition of empiricism? What's a good definition of empiricism? Metrics driven, possibly, yeah. There's maybe even a more abstract, higher level one. So I'm glad there's actually, the crowd is stunned silence, because I asked this exact question in a room full of Scrum trainers, and I got pretty much the same response. So, anybody else just a high level definition of empiricism? Making decisions based on data. We're getting empirical data, evidence. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Yeah? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I mean, the high-level working definition is, at least the way that I understand empiricism, is that all knowledge comes from either observation or experience. That's really the foundation of empiricism. All knowledge comes from either observation or experience. So if we talk about what knowledge did we gain just from observation or experience in this, in the auction? Just from an observation perspective, what was some knowledge that we had? How much is this worth? 20 pounds, right? So empirically, what's the most that we should ever bid for this thing? 20 pounds. Why, if I may ask, why when you started bidding, when the bidding got over 20 pounds, why were you able to keep going? Yeah, that's exactly, I don't know if everybody heard, he said, I would lose less if I bid more. Because if you're at the point where you've bid 19 pounds and you've been outbid by 20 pounds, now I'm still on the hook for 19 pounds and I get absolutely nothing for it, right? So it's like, oh, well, of course it makes sense to bid 21 pounds. Does it make sense to bid 21 pounds at that point, though? It's not a trick question. I'm not trying to quick trick you. Maybe I am. I don't know. You guys don't know me. Maybe you do. Maybe you do know me, and that's why you're not answering. I mean, rationally, does that make sense? I mean, why should you ever bid more than 21 pounds for 20 pounds? Right? And this is kind of what Prateek was talking about before. That's starting to get into something known as the sunk cost bias, right, and things like that. But so we are constantly surrounded by proper empirical information. But the problem is people assume that even, this is the frameworks, Scrum, Kanban, assume that if you're provided with this information, right, that humans, of course, will take that information and they will behave rationally with it, right? We will make the right decisions. As long as we make stuff transparent, as long as we have that blocker column on our board, we'll make the right decision. As long as we have that expedite column on our board, we'll make the right decision. As long as we're able to estimate in story points. Story points is math, right? It's math. So that's empirical. We just said metrics are empirical. We said it, right? Yeah, exactly. Right? So let's talk about it. Is this making sense? So let's talk about what are some of the antidotes, right? If empiricism itself is maybe kind of rooted on some false assumptions, or not, there may be not a problem with empiricism itself. There's an empiricism with the assumption that humans will behave rationally with that information. So let's talk about some missteps. I don't know what I did with the clicker. Here. Thank you.
You forgot to do this. There's a great quote, this is from Annie Duke's book, that the biggest risk is having a losing strategy when you think you have a winning one. And that goes exactly to that bias that Dan was just talking about. We as teams feel like we're making the right decision, but we never go back to check if we made the right decision. What we're going to suggest is we look at evidence over feelings. Remember that little board I showed? Oh, sorry, forgot to mention this at all completely.
Yeah.
That, this is a great quote from someone we heard this yesterday. Resources don't matter, only data matters. And of course, it's a great Jose Casal right here. He'll be up there. Ask him about this. It might have been said in jest, but I think he was serious. When we talked about this start, stop, continue model of retrospectives, what is this getting at? What are we asking people at this point? We're asking them, how do they feel? How do they feel that this stuff went? Without really being, that's not necessarily empirical. There was a great model presented yesterday by irrational analysis, which included evidence as a center point of that model. Evidence and inference. What the start, stop, continue gets at is more inference than evidence. That start, stop, continue is talking about inference and not necessarily evidence. Another audience participation, pop quiz. Which of these tables is longer? Without cocking your head to the side. Anyone? Any guesses which one of these is longer? Don't know? Right. The one on the left? Yeah. Empirically, when we look at this, we'd say the one on the left. Maybe, but if I take that table away, trust me, I have done no Photoshop magic on this. There is no sleight of hand. Those two tables are the exact same size. But empirically, when we look at this, when we try to infer, when we all talk about how does it feel, which one is longer, we're we're going to be led astray. That's why we're talking about evidence over feelings. We have inherent biases that cloud our judgment. Would rather go after evidence than feelings. The second one we want to talk about is data over math. We talked about story points, cost of delay, all that fun math stuff. Again, the more math you throw at something, the better it is. Probably not. We'd rather, instead of oh, someone was taking pictures. There. Instead of looking at these things that have a whole bunch of assumptions built into them, we would rather teams step away from those assumptions and look at their real data. For those of you not familiar with the cycle time scatter plot, this is real data of how long it was taking for this team to get things done. And you can clearly see when they started looking at their data and going, okay, we need to make some changes. And instead of trying to estimate harder and get better at estimating, they said, this is how long, the higher a dot is, the longer it's taking for something to get done. This is how long it's taking for us to get things done, made some changes, made things a lot more stable. Again, going into data rather than what is our velocity. This team's velocity was actually pretty stable even at this point of time. The last example that we had talked about earlier was utilization. We have seen this over and over again, that we see someone having a board and doing things in a particular way, and we just try to copy that. That's templated board design, that's templated process design. We'd rather it be more contextual to what you're doing. This is a pretty standard board. Again, we could probably do an entire talk about how bad this board is and the things that are wrong with it. But we would rather teams actually use something that gives context to that board. This is essentially the same board with the height of each dot telling you how long that thing has been active. I can go deeper into the colors there, but a little shorter time than that. But this essentially gives you the age of each of those dots, telling us in each column how long has something been active. It's much more contextual to the team's needs rather than some templated board from somewhere else. While inspect is about empiricism, and we've already talked a lot about the problems with empiricism, or the fact that we are not very good at being empirical, adapt is about behavior. How we change our behavior in the light of that empiricism. And in order to talk a little more about that, Dan's going to come in and talk about misbehaving.
Yep, so this whole idea of, excuse me, sorry, I keep walking in front of this thing. This whole idea of misbehaving, where your teams think they are behaving, but from an empirical perspective, they are completely misbehaving, right? They are not behaving, or they are not making the decisions that they should, given the information that they've been giving. The problem is, like I said, they believe they are behaving. They believe they're doing the right things. They believe that they are improving, when empirically they're not, right? This is just something I think I read this morning or last night or whatever, and this is this idea: beliefs in general are not binary, right? Most of us think we have a belief, it's either true or it's not true. But the way that we want you to come at this thing is, don't think of your beliefs as either true or not true. Think of your beliefs as there's a probability of it being right and a probability of it being wrong, right? There is a probability that everything that we have told you today is wrong. It's a very, very small probability, of course, but there's a probability, right, that it is actually wrong. Think about all the things that you believe in terms of your process, in terms of process improvement, in terms of things like that. And when you start making decisions based on those beliefs, instead of just saying, well, I believe it, so therefore it must be true, let's gather some data, let's gather some evidence to find out, is it true or not? And by the way, this gets back to that Annie Duke quote. Well, it's not Annie Duke's. I don't know if anybody knows Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets. The whole idea of the biggest risk is thinking you have or is having a losing strategy when you think you have a winning one. It is possible to still make all the right decisions and get a very bad outcome, right? That is completely possible as well. But that's for next time. I don't know. This is just like last year. I can't even believe I got invited back this year. So I'm definitely not getting invited back next year. But for next year, if we do get invited back, some of the topics that we do want to explore is this idea of, because our beliefs are not binary, and because we potentially don't know as much as we think we do up front, the whole idea is to find out how wrong you are as quickly as possible. Now, this is nothing new. This is not, I mean, Agile has been talking about this. Lean has been talking about this from the very beginning, right? We're just hopefully, putting a little bit different spin on it or whatever. And then, of course, beware and inept and inapt. So in this talk, we've talked about the failures of empiricism and people's behavior based on that empiricism. We've given you some ideas about how to fix those things. But like I said, for next time, what we kind of have to throw out as a teaser for next time is kind of a deeper dive into, okay, well, really, how do we really go out and verify this thing? How do we evaluate our decision-making frameworks? How do we really do that? That, unfortunately, like I said, will be for next year's conference. I think we've got a little bit of time, right? Do we? Yes? So I'd like to, we did want to reserve some time at the end for some questions. We went through this fairly quickly. We only had 30 minutes. That's not a judgment. That's an empirical observation. Yeah. Any questions or any thoughts or any observations about anything that we've covered so far? Anybody would like to say something?
You're asking for comments instead of questions?
Or whatever.
Yeah, compliments mostly.
Yeah, really.
So,
That didn't mean
is this
hand him
on?
the mic.
It is
Yeah,
on.
no way.
Now I've got a microphone,
Yeah.
and you all have to listen to me.
Okay.
Are you familiar with abductive logic?
Ish. Not
Ish.
really, yeah.
What can you define abductive logic-ish for me?
No.
No. Any takers? Anybody familiar with abductive logic? Oh, we got one. You want to give us a definition? You have to speak into the microphone.
There's three types of logic, basically: inductive, deductive, and abductive. Inductive basically is from from the small sample set general. Deductive is from the general to. Abductive is actually the science of hunches, when Pest originally wrote about. So it's basically where we actually have these logical leaps of insight.
That's close. So I gave an Ignite talk on this at DevOps Enterprise Summit, if you want to see it, but deductive logic starts at the top and moves down. Inductive starts at the bottom, moves up. Abductive looks at the inertia and doesn't make any decisions. So there's an argument that the concept of good and bad are just very value judgy and maybe ontologically invalid, and we should start looking at the inertia in the system and the landscape we're dealing with instead of making value judgments. But I don't know, maybe.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Yes, and.
So one of the slides that you had was talking about how when you come to the retrospective, we're talking about feeling, and that's more inference, and we're looking for more evidence-based. So any suggestions or ideas on how we actually measure some of these things, that rather than feeling it, they can say, okay, I can know this thing to be true. And maybe how they decide as well, because I guess the point is you don't want to measure everything, so it's only the stuff they care about.
Yeah. So being American, my favorite method when somebody brings feelings to a retrospective is generally just to punch them in the face. That's what. But in terms of measuring, it's sorry. Did you want to answer? Because this is your part of the talk.
Go ahead.
All right. In terms of measuring, it's a lot of the things that that we talked about. Because I don't know if anybody's experienced this before. You go to a retrospective, you get the team together, and the team makes a decision. Everybody feels really, really, really good about it, right? They feel really, really good, even though it's the absolute wrong decision. But we do it because everybody feels good about that. I don't know. Has anyone ever experienced that before? And that's what we're trying to get against. So that's why the stuff that Prateek was talking about. Can we measure the actual outcomes, based on that scatter plot? Mm-hmm. Can we even make proactive decisions based on the aging chart?
Yeah, what's the baseline against which we're going and saying, hey, we need to make this change? Or we're finding 10 defects in production every month. We want to lower that to 2 defects in production, whatever that is. A great book around this topic is Douglas Hubbard's How to Measure Anything. I would highly recommend that, and lots of great ideas in there about when we go into something, let's find out what our baseline is, and then talk about, by next retrospective, let's see how much the baseline has moved based on what we talked about.
So, oh yeah, one more.
It's one of the things behind this, the first lesson to learn for the teams is to be honest, because we, by nature, want to appear helpful, better than we are, and we hide what's going on, and we don't, for example, with actionable agile and the sort of Monte Carlo modeling of things, you have to have the data in there that is actually true, and people are, if they're using Jira or something, will actually move their task into in progress when they start, and you know, into the next phase when they're finished, rather than just either sort of just kind of, oh, there, I'll just do it any old how, and just hiding that. So you've got to get the team to be honest about what is actually happening before you can start getting the right data to start measuring it. Although I think it's a bit chicken and egg now I'm talking about it. You can certainly see from those kind of graphs where people are just using things like Jira as a ticketing thing, and they'll just open it and close it, and you have those 1 minute throughput things.
Sorry, I'm gonna. The point of the talk is really more. If you study the Scrum framework, if you study Kanban or whatever, it says, hey, you do all of these things, right? Empiricism, transparency. Do all of these things, your lives will be magically better. And what we're finding out is that's absolutely not true. And the reason that it's absolutely not true is because people are involved. And people will not behave rationally. You think people will behave rationally, but in general, people will not behave rationally. So I think, I mean, obviously, I think everything that you're saying comes into that. But I can't tell you how many times I go into a team who say they're doing Scrum, and they're not really behaving empirically, who say they're doing Kanban, but design a board like Prateek just showed you, right? That's really rather the point of the talk. So don't necessarily feel that empiricism is necessarily going to save you. We have to save ourselves from ourselves, I guess. Yeah. Let's do this so that we have a little bit of time for changeover. The next talk has a little bit of time for changeover. I guess we can wrap it up there. If anybody wants to ask questions, as a rule, I do not answer hard questions. You can find Prateek for the rest of the day. And sorry we didn't run long enough, and you're probably going to have to talk to Jose now, or to listen to Jose.
Ask him about that quote, that resources thing.
Resources don't matter, only data matters,
Yes.
all right? So anyway, thanks you very much. Thanks for the
Thank you.
invitation to the Natural Brighton. Thanks, guys.